Heads up. Tall, dark, and horny at 12 o'clock.
Ghostbusters is my all-time favorite movie. I've literally seen the damn thing hundreds of times. After waiting decades for a new movie and losing one of the main cast members, we finally got a follow-up in Ghostbusters Afterlife. The film wasn't so much a Ghostbusters movie as it was more like a drama made to give closure on the passing of Harold Ramis. And even though it was great to see my heroes back on the big screen after all these years, I honestly wasn't looking forward to a follow-up. I got that nostalgia rush I needed and really felt indifferent when another Ghostbusters movie was announced. When I finally saw the trailers for the next Ghostbusters film, Frozen Empire, I noticed something felt off. It kind of had a real Ghostbusters vibe to it, which isn't a bad thing, but more so Slimer and the real Ghostbusters, and if you know, you know. So now that the movie has been out for a while, I figured I would dive in and dissect it because I have some things I need to say, and obviously full spoilers ahead. Every Ghostbusters film that has come out begins with the inciting incident that gets the story kickstarted, and here, instead of being current day, is actually a flashback to 1904. There are some firefighters that enter the Manhattan Adventurers Society as all of its members have been completely frozen. I will say this opening sequence that starts everything off is pretty solid. I especially love the frozen hand still attached to the phonograph. But since this movie is basically re-establishing that the Ghostbusters are a thing, then why does the movie not open with the theme song? I understand Afterlife not opening with the theme because it was doing something different and didn't want to trick people into thinking they were getting a regular Ghostbusters movie. But if this movie is supposed to be setting out that they're back in business, then you need to treat it like a normal Ghostbusters movie. Here it just feels like a generic Marvel movie. We then get a shot of some mysterious orb and the movie's big bad guy, and we're off to the races. Literally, because the reformed Ghostbusters are now chasing a sewer dragon ghost down the streets of New York. A nitpick for this film and Afterlife is the writers seem to forget how the ghost-busting equipment is supposed to work. The proton streams are supposed to act like tethers. Once you have a ghost in your stream, you wrangle them over to the trap so you can catch them. Think of a cowboy in his lasso or a fisherman in his rod. If you have the ghost in your proton stream, there's no reason to keep driving after them. You can stay stationary because the ghost isn't going anywhere. You just need to fight with them until you can drag them over to the trap. Just go back and watch how the Ghostbusters caught the Scoleri brothers in Ghostbusters 2. The Spengler family is back again along with Paul Rudd's Gary Gooberson, who's acting kind of like a father figure, but is really only the mother's boyfriend. This adds in some more of that family drama that the series is so well known for. Because Phoebe and Gary don't exactly know how their relationship is supposed to be, as she's getting older and trying to figure herself out. And he doesn't really know where he fits in as a parental figure, so you know, big laughs so far. The new Ghostbusters get called in to see the mayor, who chews them out for all the damage they caused in the city. And the first of many, and I mean many, key jangling member berries pops on the screen when William Atherton, aka Walter Peck, from the very first film, is now the mayor of New York. And just like the original film, his concerns are valid. They have a 15-year-old girl swinging out of the side of a moving vehicle, firing a proton stream in the middle of New York City, putting who knows how many lives at risk. Just because her grandfather was a Ghostbuster, that doesn't mean a 15-year-old can throw in a pack and start blowing up the city. If my grandfather was a cop, could I just take his badge and gun and call myself one too? Even Egon himself said that the proton pack wasn't a toy in the second movie.
Hey, you guys got another one of those proton packs? My kid brother really wants one.
The proton pack is not a toy.
I guess it's right.
So she's upset because all she wants to do is be a Ghostbuster. And trust me, kid, I'm almost 40 years old and I feel ya. Gary also feels kind of lost because he doesn't know where he fits into their family. Meanwhile, Podcast is back, I guess because he was in the last movie, despite having nothing to do with the family, and is creating a YouTube show or a TikTok show with Ray Stantz, where they check on people's old junk to see if it's haunted, which is a great grift. Phoebe drops by with a little mood slime, and the mini puffs are still hanging around in the basement, despite being a manifestation of Gozer, which means they probably shouldn't exist at all, since Gozer is kind of trapped at the moment. Also, the only reason Podcast is even here is because he told his family he was going to space camp for the summer and snuck away with Ray instead. We then meet our first new character of the film, being Nadim, played by Kumail Nanjiani. Nadeem brought in a bunch of his grandmother's old stuff, hoping he can sell some of it, and he just so happened to bring in the strange orb from the beginning of the film. The orbs are ancient artifacts used to capture and store spirits, so basically an OG ghost trap. Ray scans it with the PKE meter, and it gives off a reading so powerful that it destroys the meter and appears to be calling to the Ghostbusters containment unit. Now, if you had an object that radiated this much spectral energy, what do you think Ray should do with it? That's right, leave it right where it destroyed his display case for what appears to be many hours, despite how dangerous it appears to be. Meanwhile, Trevor has been noticing some black mold and slime coming from the attic of the firehouse, and when he investigates it, well, it's our good friend Slimer, who's just been hanging around the firehouse for 40 years, I guess. I kinda wish it was the bus driving Slimer, but that would have been too much like the cartoon. The Ghostbusters get a call and head out, leaving Phoebe behind, looking like a sad puppy dog. She heads to the nearby chess tables in what I'm assuming is Central Park, which I don't think is the safest place for a tiny 15-year-old girl to be alone. A ghost starts playing chess with her, and I originally thought it was going to be Egon again after what happened in Afterlife, but he did cross over. Instead, it's a young flaming ghost named Melody who died in a fire along with her family. A fire we'll find out she's actually responsible for. The two chit-chat about what being a ghost is like, and that's really all there is to this scene. One of Winston's guys from R&D named Lars comes down to check on the containment unit, as it seems like the ghosts inside are all trying to come out. The problem seems to be that the containment unit is full, and its eruption back in 1984 seemed to open some kind of rift or gateway. But none of this matters because Winston and his engineers have been building all new containment units and gear without even telling the people who are supposed to be using it. Trevor is then reunited with Lucky from Afterlife, who just so happens to be doing an internship with the Ghostbusters. One of the major issues with this movie is it's so bloated with characters, and almost none of them have anything to do. Both Lucky and Trevor offered nothing in the previous movie, and the same can be said in this one. Podcast at least had a friendship with Phoebe in the last movie, but here he's just shoehorned in, and the two don't really interact much. And there are still more characters yet to be introduced that in the grand scheme of things offer nothing to the story and just weigh things down. One of the new pieces of equipment shown off is this machine that can extract spirits from possessed objects, so it can be sent to the newly built containment unit. Phoebe asks if they've tried it on possessed people, but that hasn't come up yet and definitely won't play into the story later. They also have ghosts and paranormal fish tanks now as well, so they can study them, which are all powered by the same technology used for the proton packs. They're also shown a possessor ghost that can quickly move from object to object. A little later, the Ghostbusters head out on a call and leave Phoebe behind. However, they receive another call, and she decides to go out on her own. Well, until Podcast decides he's gonna tag along as well. Meanwhile, Lars and Lucky try extracting the spirit from the brass orb, and it's so powerful it nearly shuts everything down. You'd think these people would have seen Jurassic Park and maybe have some backup power to keep the ghosts from escaping their enclosures, but they get lucky and the power turns back on just in time. Phoebe and Podcast arrive where the ghost is, and it turns out to be Melody. But Phoebe hesitates to capture the ghost when Melody asks who the third wheel is, meaning Podcast. And I would love to know what the insurance rates must look like for the Ghostbusters. Back at the firehouse, Phoebe is interrupted by Melody, and the two have a little girl talk. Although the main reason Melody is there is because she appears to be working alongside the big bad of the movie, Garraka, and needs Phoebe for something, even though she appears to be a bit hesitant. The following day, while they check out the orb's ability to hypnotize or control the mini-puffs, it causes a slight disturbance that no one seems to notice, allowing the possessor ghost to slip free from its enclosure. They decide to find out more about this orb and where it came from, so they track down Nadeem, who takes them to a brass room where his grandmother kept the orb along with other artifacts. The brass is said to keep things quiet, both the noise and spiritual energy. In the meantime, Nadeem needs to be brought back because he seems to be setting off the PKE meter. And finally, an hour into the damn movie, Bill Murray shows up. So maybe, hopefully, something funny will actually happen, because until now, there's been almost no humor in a movie that is supposed to be a comedy. Venkman starts asking Nadim questions, typical stuff. Do you like puppies? How do you eat children? And the flame behind Nadim begins to react to him, almost like he's controlling it. Meanwhile, Ray, Podcast, and Phoebe discover what appears to be a dead language that was being spoken from the orb. So we have to meet yet another new character at the New York Public Library so they can explain to everyone what it all means. Oh, and hey, do you remember the guy from the library at the beginning of the original movie? Well, he's still here too. The movie then takes a massive nosedive as the expert they were coming to see turns out to be Patton Oswalt, one of the most insufferable people on the planet. The only reason he's even in this damn thing is so he can dump exposition about the orb, basically the same thing that Ray and Egon would have done in the earlier films. But we have to find replacements for everyone, even if they are massive downgrades. Alright, so this damn orb holds Garraka, some spooky ice god who tried to destroy the world until people known as Fire Masters used the brass orb and fire magic to seal him away. Basically, ancient magic Ghostbusters, just with boring magic powers instead of fun proton packs. And remember the Adventurers Club from the beginning? Well, Patton lets them listen to the recording they made of the chant that was used to open the orb. And while this is all going on, that pesky possessor ghost steals the chant so it can try and free Garraka. I don't know how this possessor ghost plans on playing the chant without a phonograph, but I doubt it's thought that far. As they're chasing the possessor, Ray comes face to face with the library ghost, and as quickly as she came, she's gone. I thought maybe they would actually do something with the library ghost. Maybe they would finally catch her, or she would be part of something later on in the movie. Maybe part of Garraka's ghost army. But no, this is it. This one 10-second scene, just so you can say, hey, I remember the library ghost. The one positive thing I'll mention is I do believe they used a combination of puppetry and CGI, because she does look great, but it's like, that's it? When they go outside, the possessor takes over one of the lion statues out front, but luckily their little motorcycle carries a neutrona wand in it so they can easily dispatch it, destroying the cylinder in the process and allowing the possessor to get away. This lands them all in hot water with the mayor, who basically shuts the Ghostbusters down. This leads to melodrama between the family and a rift between Winston and Ray, because Ray doesn't want to give up being a Ghostbuster. Despite his age, he still has that drive, whereas Winston, well, he was there for a steady paycheck. I mean, he still has love for being a Ghostbuster, but like in the original film and in real life, Dan Aykroyd is the heart of the Ghostbusters. Despite everything the mayor said, they break back inside the firehouse for maybe the last time. While the others pack up, Ray is convinced Nadim's grandmother was a fire master. Therefore, Nadim might be one as well. So Ray begins to test him with a lighter. Phoebe goes off and pouts until Melody shows up, and the two go for a walk. Phoebe talks about how the only one who gets her is a ghost, which is unfortunate. But imagine if they were both ghosts, then they could be super best friends. Remember the machine from earlier? The one that can separate a spirit from a possessed object? Yeah, she's gonna use that to remove her spirit from her earthbound body so she can spend some time with Melody in the spirit realm, or whatever it is. This was at no point brought up as a possibility in the movie, besides one little interaction where Phoebe asked if the machine would work on possessed people, but she's not possessed. Her spirit hasn't taken over her body, that's just who she is. So if she removes it, she should die. It doesn't matter anyways because she's willing to do whatever she can to spend some time with someone who gets her, as she puts it. Well, it works, and Phoebe is now a ghost. And it's quite obvious what the filmmakers were trying to do with the girls' little friendship, but I think they got cold feet and pulled back. It's quite obvious throughout the movie that Phoebe was developing a crush on Melody, and I've seen the back and forth discussion from both sides on the topic, but I mean, it's clear as day. There have been little comments made here and there between the two, and look, I was never a 15-year-old girl, so I don't know how they act with one another, but I know I've never looked at one of my guy friends the way Phoebe looks at Melody. The whole thing just feels like a bit of queer baiting from the writers, and they left it ambiguous just enough that depending on the feedback, they could go either way with it. Look, I don't care one way or another, but I'm watching this movie like if you're gonna do it, then just commit. Don't pussyfoot around it. But none of it matters anyways, because the whole damn thing was a double cross. Garraka needed Phoebe as a ghost so he could control her, because he needs a human voice to speak the chant in order to open the orb. But how is her human body speaking when her spirit is no longer inside of it? Melody did all this because Garraka promised he would open the door to the other side so Melody could be with her family. But how did Garraka know this would work? How did he know there was a machine that could separate a spirit from a body to begin with? Yes, I know the orb was at the research and development place, and he likely learned while he was there. But Melody started talking to Phoebe long before he knew of the machine. None of it matters anyways because Garraka is freed, Phoebe is sent flying back into her body, and Melody gets the f*** out of Dodge. Lucky comes in guns blazing, but Garraka freezes her proton stream, which is kind of a cool looking effect, and then he just skedaddles. Why not freeze Lucky too? I mean, he does in the trailers. Garraka is now on the warpath looking for fire masters, and the first place he stops in is a fire master smoke shop, which is kind of funny, but he straight up murders the guy. As evil as Gozer and Vigo were, I don't remember them murdering anyone. Garraka busts into Nadim's place looking for his horns, which is where his real power comes from. But what if Nadim had closed the door? Would he not have been able to open it because it was brass? And if they knew Garraka was housed in this room because it kept him from contacting other ghosts or escaping in general, then why not put the orb back? Or hell, make a bronze container that you can permanently seal, that way he's stuck forever and you never have to worry about him. Nah, I guess leaving it out in the open in this thing makes much more sense. With Garraka free and with his +2 to magic horns equipped, he's able to conjure up immense winter storms and now control any and all ghosts. The Ghostbusters need to gear up anyone and everyone because Garraka is coming for the firehouse and the Ghostbusters containment unit. But wait, how are they supposed to gear up when Walter Peck had the firehouse condemned and took all of their proton packs? Well, they just had more at the R&D lab, obviously. I guess that whole subplot with Peck shutting them down was a huge waste of our time. Now that they have their new proton packs, how do they think they'll stop Garraka? They've tried proton packs before and they did very little. But Phoebe comes up with a plan to brass plate parts of her proton pack, which should give them an edge. But why just hers? Why not all of them? Would that not make more sense? I mean, it looks like she has a lot of brass to spare. The Ghostbusters all suit up, including the originals and Janine, which is really the only reason you're watching this movie to begin with. Even Venkman makes his return for the second and last time you'll see him. And even with his limited screen time, he still works circles around the new cast. It's embarrassing. In the meantime, Nadim continues to practice his firebending while the others get to deal with the possessor ghost who takes over the Ecto-1 and then Lucky's proton pack. But before it manages to kill anyone, Nadim is somehow able to control the proton stream, which is definitely not fire. And then the possessor ghost goes into a pizza and is eaten by Slimer, which ends the Slimer story arc of the movie. But how does that work exactly? Can a ghost kill another ghost by eating it? Anyways, Phoebe goes downstairs and finds Melody looking at the containment unit, and she asks her if any of it was real, which just adds more fuel to what I think was supposed to be a relationship, or at the very least a crush. But it's not time to kiss and make up because Garraka finally made it to the firehouse. The Ghostbusters blast away at him, but it's completely in vain. Lucky's even like, see, I told you it wouldn't work. The movie then completely stops in its tracks when Nadim comes slowly sliding down the pole wearing the Firemaster armor, in probably the only scene that made me somewhat laugh in the entire movie. Nadim fails to do anything and Garraka breaks open the containment unit, once again unleashing all the ghosts just like in 1984. So that's it. The bad guy wins and the world is doomed. Or is it? Because Phoebe comes in with her new souped up proton pack, which seems to be super effective against this ice-type ghost. The rest of the Ghostbusters were all frozen though, so they should all be dead. Phoebe does her best to hold off Garraka, but she's no match. Now if only there were more souped up proton packs. All hope seems lost until Melody finally lights the match that she's been carrying around the entire film. You see, as Ray explained earlier in the movie, ghosts can be bound to physical items that have gone through a deep emotional experience, and this being the last match that killed Melody and her family, she's been bound to it, unable to strike it. Until right now. This gives Nadim the fire he needed to use his little gift and help free the rest of the Ghostbusters. Now hold up 1 second. I thought Garraka could control all ghosts, so why didn't he just control Melody and prevent her from using her match? Or hell, why didn't he control any of the ghosts he released to help him defeat the Ghostbusters? He controlled Ghost Phoebe just fine when he wasn't even released from the orb, and she really wasn't even a ghost. So why not control Melody too? I guess the writers just forgot the rules they themselves created. The real Ghostbusters get freed, and Ray comes up with one of the most nonsensical plans for defeating Garraka. They intend on using the containment unit itself as a trap. You know, the containment unit with the giant gaping hole in it? Yeah, somehow he thinks if they reverse it, it'll basically suck Garraka in and repair itself in the process, which makes absolutely no sense. But they do it, and it works. It seriously seals itself shut once Garraka is inside, and then Melody floats off as she finally gets to cross over. They try and make the moment all sad and meaningful, like they did with Egon, but no one knows who Melody is outside of Phoebe, so why would any of them care? When the Ghostbusters go outside, there's suddenly a crowd waiting for them and waving brand new Ghostbusters t-shirts. Is there a Ghostbusters t-shirt stand around the corner or something? Walter Peck then shows up to try and shut them down again, and we get a confrontation between Peck and Venkman that lasts maybe 2 seconds. Seriously, Venkman gets to say like one thing, and then he's abruptly cut off. It feels like there's supposed to be more to that back and forth, but it's such an awkward edit. And hey, remember when Ray called Peck dickless in the original movie?
Everything was fine with our system until the power grid was shut off by Dickless here.
Well, you get some random guy in the crowd who shouts, "Hey, why don't you thank them, Dickless?" Like, I get it. I love the original movie too, but relax with the member berries. The mayor then sheepishly sort of embraces the Ghostbusters because he has no choice, and all the family drama is settled when Gary calls them the Spenglers, despite not being married to Callie, and Phoebe calls him Dad, which comes out of nowhere and feels weird and unearned. And then the movie just ends with them chasing after Slimer and the sewer ghost, while the Ghostbusters theme finally plays. So what do I think of the movie? Well, it's not good, but I also don't think it's bad. It's just boring. I mean, where was the ghost busting? You had a 5-minute scene in the beginning, but that was about it. The first 2 movies both had great ghost busting scenes in the middle, with fun montage sequences after. If you're gonna do it, then do it right. And if you don't have fun ghost busting, then you at least need good, humorous character moments. The rest of the movie was exposition central with very little happening. And when stuff actually started happening, the movie was almost over. All of that stuff at the end with everything freezing should have happened no later than the halfway mark of the movie. The trailers made it seem like the Ghostbusters would be dealing with some frozen hellscape when they just stayed inside the firehouse, and the whole thing was barely an inconvenience to them. The movie runs about an hour and 45 minutes, but there's so much fluff in here that you could easily cut it down to 90. And if I'm being honest, it's time to ditch the kids. If it were up to me, the only one from the previous movie that I would have brought back would have been Paul Rudd and maybe Phoebe. The rest are pretty much disposable. Trevor does nothing besides his little Slimer side quest. Lucky just happens to be there because she suddenly has an interest in science, despite never having any in the previous movie. Podcast shows up and really adds nothing to the movie. Callie is at least less bitchy in this one, but that's about all I can say about her. Patton Oswalt was pointless, and all of his stuff could have been given to Ray. I would have beefed up the roles of the actual Ghostbusters, you know, Winston, Ray, and Venkman, while also having a younger group that they can mentor. And when I say younger, I mean like 25 to 40-year-olds, not children. But the movie as a whole just feels like a generic Marvel movie now, especially with the introduction of magic powers. It's so much more interesting when they're defeating ghosts and gods with science, but now they have magic. No longer do these movies feel like films made by comedic geniuses who work their asses off on SCTV and SNL. Now it feels like a movie made by a committee of people, with actors who couldn't improv their way out of a paper bag. The movie was a flop in theaters, not even breaking even. And I know people will see the $100 million budget and the $200 million box office and think the movie made money, but the budget doesn't include marketing costs, which can be almost as expensive as the budget itself. And the movie studio only makes like 50% of the money that the ticket sales generate. So just to break even, you're looking at $250 to $300 million. The only thing that may have saved it is selling the streaming rights to Netflix and merchandising deals, because Ghostbusters merch still sells, just not to kids. The only way to continue is if they lower the budget and lower the scope of the movies. But can they really be lowered any more than they already are? Do you think that maybe at some point the proton packs need to be hung up for good? I mean, does every single franchise need to live on forever? Look, I love the Ghostbusters. These guys were my heroes growing up, but it's just not the same. They can keep trying to throw in nostalgia, but it'll never recapture the feeling of those first 2 movies. Even Ray throughout the movie seems to struggle with the idea that he's just too old to keep doing this, despite it being what he loves. Or, you know, maybe I'm the issue. maybe I'm just no longer the target audience for this franchise. I think if the movie was at least funny, it would have gone a long way to help, but keeping the family drama nonsense, which I was okay with for the last movie because it was doing something different and trying to honor the passing of Harold Ramis, only seemed to hurt the movie in the long run. But I think this movie has even made me see the previous one in a different light. Will I go back and watch this movie? No. I don't see myself ever watching this movie again. Will I go back and rewatch the originals? Yes, I still have hundreds of rewatches to go until I pass on to the other side. But you know, I think that's enough for me. I think I rambled on for way too long. I would love to know what you thought of this movie. I'm sure my take is controversial because I know a lot of people seem to like this one, but for me, it really missed the mark. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and stay spooky.
Let's try this.
Light 'em up!